Welcome to the International School of Tailoring. My name is Reza and this is our 33rd lesson of our How to Make a Bespoke Jacket series.
You can already see that the lapel section is...
In the previous lesson, we covered the fundamental theories of sleeves. In today's lesson, we're going to bring all of that knowledge together to base the sleeves of our Pagoda model. Now, this lesson is extremely important. I don't care how many sleeves you've put in. If you haven't done the exercises that I gave you in the previous lesson, please do not begin this lesson until you've done them. Insight is gained when complex matters suddenly seem simple. I have simplified all these otherwise complex matters so that you would gain the insight within 10 minutes instead of 10 years, okay? Having said that, the entire purpose of this lesson is for you to master ease distribution. I don't want you to think about pitch. I don't want you to think about the hang of the sleeve, anything else but ease distribution, okay? Sounds like a good deal to me. So, this is what we're going to do. First, I'm going to recap 3 factors of relative length that we're going to apply on our sleeves today, along with 3 additional ones on handling them. Then we're going to finish the sleeves by putting them around the armhole, securing them and all of that. And last but not least, we're going to go through the evaluation. You ready? Let's begin. As we approach our sleeves, we're going to deal with 3 factors of relative length that I've covered in separate lessons with you. Those are opposing curves, shape by angle, and gathers. Now, one of the reasons why people struggle with understanding sleeves and learning them is because none of these are actually articulated as separate concepts. It becomes tacit knowledge. People will tell you, you just have to do a lot of sleeves to understand it. Now, if you put sleeves in for like 10 years, intuitively, you would understand these things. But it's much better if you have them as clear, separate concepts standing on their own, okay? So the first thing that you're going to encounter when putting in your sleeves is going to be opposing curves. As you place your top sleeve against your armhole, right side to right side, the first thing that you're going to notice is that the armhole curve is going in one direction and the top sleeve curve is going in another direction. As you try to force these lines together, surplus is created on the top sleeve. However, that surplus does not create volume per se. Volume is created through shape by angle. Most of shape by angle happens during the pattern cutting phase. But this is essentially what happens with our sleeves. If you place your top sleeve on the armhole, on a flat pattern, you'll notice that the top sleeve is bigger. This overlap is marked as the red sections. Now, your undersleeve does the opposite. Instead of having an overlap, it has actually a gap. Whether it's a gap or an overlap, we saw that if you try to force 2 shapes together that have either a gap or an overlap between them, volume is created, okay? Now, when volume is created, of course, you need to make sure that that's very smoothly distributed. That brings us to the gather domain. Now, when you're dealing with gathers, you can do multiple things. You could do a fade in and out. So you start with very little gathers and then you increase that and then you fade off again. You can do it very inconsistently if you're not experienced or you haven't practiced a lot. You can do it very consistently, the same amounts from the beginning to the end, or you can leave some areas just flat. Okay? So when we put our sleeves in, all these 3 factors are going to be happening all at once. Now, to get all of this right, you need to handle the jacket, the armhole, and the sleeve well. So here are 3 points that you must imprint in your mind and remember forever on how to handle sleeves and armholes. Let's have a look. Rule number 1, thou shalt not just randomly push fabric in. What do I mean by that? So imagine this is your armhole and this is your sleeve and you want to baste these together. You're not just going to, go around and just push fabric around, okay? There is a method to this. This method at least works with nature instead of against it, and you can rely on it pretty much 80% of the time. What are you going to do? When you place your sleeve against your armhole, you're going to baste with a distance of 3/8. So let's say this is your starting point. You've done a back tack, Now you want to continue basting and controlling the ease. What are you going to do? Well, since your next bite is going to be 3/8 in front of the previous one, in this area, you're going to try to bring the edge of the sleeve here to the edge of the armhole by holding the previous bite and just moving this point over like that. Automatically, that creates pretty much the right amount of surplus and gather that you need for that shape. Now, it's not going to be always 100% accurate because you might have drafted a very weird sleeve, but if all the shapes are harmonized together correctly, you will be very close to perfection with that. So instead of just randomly pushing all around, you will bring the area in which you're going to put your next bite over to the edge. That creates a surplus, and that's that. Rule number 2, thou shalt always baste over the surplus. In other words, your surplus should be trapped between 2 bites. So imagine this is my starting point. I hold this in my hand. I bring this over. I create my surplus. Okay, my next bite should be over the surplus. You see this surplus here? Over it. I cannot emphasize this enough. So when you put your bite in, that surplus is trapped. What you should not do is to create your surplus. So bring this over and then, baste on top of it, like go with the needle on top of it, or even worse, underneath it, like that. Why is this a problem? It's a problem because when you fold your sleeve over and you want to kind of like allow it to hang, your ease is not going to be distributed correctly and held in place. It's going to go all over, all around, and you're not going to be able to control it, okay? So that's that. Now, rule number 3, probably the most important of all these rules that I just told you. You shall always move the jacket as you are basting. I do not want to see you stand like this when you're basting your sleeves, or like this or like that. It's nonsense. You're going to kill your neck, your shoulders, your back, everything. Concentration gone means quality of work gone, okay? So every time you're working on a section, remind yourself that you should be in this position, sewing a horizontal line, okay? There's no point or reason for you to be like this, or to like this, or to like this, all right? Keep your posture professional. So every time you go around, instead of you moving around with the seam, keep moving and rotating the jacket as you go, all right? So now that we know all of this, let's actually put the actual jacket sleeve to the armhole. If you've done the traditional model, you know what's coming. If you haven't, I'm going to talk you through this step by step. First of all, make sure that your sleeve and your jacket are pressed and free of wrinkles. It might be that you haven't spent a lot of time in between the different steps, so you're picking this up from whatever stage you're at, and maybe it's being crumpled up, okay? So this is what you're going to do. You're going to first get everything out of the way so that you can see this entire shoulder as clearly as possible. Double check to see whether the mark stitches of your front pitch and your back pitch are in place. Again, it might be that they have been rubbed out. Take a sharp chalk and mark your front pitch and the front pitch of your left sleeve, okay, your left armhole. I assume that most of you are right-handed, and if you're right-handed, it's easier to put the left sleeve in first because you can start from the bottom, work your way upwards towards the back while keeping your hands in this position. If you start with the right sleeve and you're right-handed and you want to start from the front all the way to the back, you're going to have to work like this, and this is the last position that I want to see you in, okay? So mark the front pitch like that, and then from the very edge of your armhole, mark a seam in. Don't get confused by this basting here. This is only because we didn't have any inlay on the front curve and we couldn't put the baste right on the edge. So we brought it a little bit lower, but as soon as the inlay is added, that's where we are going to use this line, okay? So if you're basting your sleeve, the edge is your armhole run, which continues into the mark stitches. So from the edge, seam off, that's a centimeter, okay? And we're going to do the same on the back pitch. Now, there are two horizontal mark stitches here. The one that is closer to the chest line is going to be the top of your side seam, okay? We need the one above that, the one that's closer to the shoulder seam. That is your back pitch. So mark that, okay? Seam off inwards. And now you have marked the pitches of your armhole. Then I want you to take your sleeve. Do the same on the sleeve. Mark the front pitch from the sleeve run, seam inwards, mark that parallel to the sleeve run, like so, and then move it to the back. Here we have the hind arm, here we have the sleeve run, mark a parallel line, seam off, right on the hind arm, and that intersection, okay, this cross right here, is going to be your back pitch. Then I want you to take the jacket, lay it in front of you like this, as neatly as you can, and put the sleeve first on top of your armhole to make sure you've got the right sleeve. If you are not experienced, or even if you're experienced, if you're in a hurry, you're confused, you're in love, you're on drugs or whatever, it might be that you try to baste in the right sleeve into the left armhole. It has happened twice with me, and it might happen twice or once with you as well. So once you have laid this on, I want you to match the intersection that you have here with the intersection that you have right here. So front pitch of the sleeve matches with the front pitch of the armhole. Right side to right side, match, pin, like that, okay? Now, then I want you to allow the sleeve to rest on the armhole, like so, okay? And the runs, so the edge of the armhole, matching with that of the sleeve. Allow this to bend over your hand. Position this as easy as possible. Once you have a good match between the edge right above the underarm seam and the sleeve run, I want you to put a pin right there, like that, okay? Then thread your needle, make a knot, rotate the jacket so that it's positioned in front of you, double check to see if your runs are matching, and put the first stitch at the base of the armhole. Back tack once with a knot, and now you're ready to go. Please keep in mind, a roped sleeve is not always easily put in. There's going to be a lot of surplus and fullness that you have to distribute. I assume that you have practiced with the traditional model, or that you have sufficient experience in taking this on. But if you don't have a lot of experience and you just jumped into this, I'm sure you can do it, but please be patient, okay? This is not a straight seam that you're going to do from A to B and everything is easy and perfect. You have to go over the different parts, make sure that your distribution is as neat as possible. This sleeve is bigger than the final result, and the final sleeve is going to be when we are finishing the jacket. Obviously, the reason for that is I want you to be forced to distribute a lot of surpluses around this armhole. Why do I want that? If you manage to distribute a lot of surplus around this armhole neatly, you, one, understand how much the fabric can take, and two, are not intimidated by it, so that three, you can always have a very rich, full, bespoke sleeve, okay? If someone says to you, if the sleeve is cut well, it shouldn't have a lot of fullness, or if it's engineered well, nonsense. You have to be a good artisan. You have to be able to work anything that's thrown at you, and you do that by training in these moments with excess sleeves, surplus, and excess whatever. so that you know what the cloth can take, what you can take, and that's that. Okay, let's begin. So my hand goes underneath the fabric only, and there's going to be a little bit of ease between the base of the armhole and the front pitch. We're not talking about miles of fullness, it's just a little bit, okay? If you bend this over your hand as I did and pin this, you should have enough ease in there. Based with a stitch length of 3/8 and a bite size of 1/8. That's 3 millimeters in bite size. Keep it neat. Make sure the thread is firmly holding the sleeve and the armhole together. And once you get to the front pitch, do a back tack. Before you do a back tack, hold the first starting point, pull the thread to make sure that your thread is not very loose, and then do your back tack. Now you can take both pins out. Please don't keep them in, because once you're fitting the jacket, you don't want anyone to feel those pins. Now rotate the jacket, because you have to position this correctly, okay? I don't want you to dance around the jacket. What you're going to do is the following. You're going to hold every time you're going to do the next stitch. You're going to hold the previous stitch. Make sure the sleeve is as flat on the jacket as possible, okay? And to some extent, what you could do to get everything as good as you can right from the start is position this with the forearm seam or the forearm fold matching your front pitch mark right here, okay? Like so. Put this here, then fold it over, okay? Ignore this, and allow this part to lay flat, okay? Just like that, nothing too difficult. Then hold your last stitch, bring the area that you're planning to put your needle in, so that's about 3/8 further, over like that to the armhole run. Now, when you do that, you automatically create the surplus that is required to get the sleeve around this armhole. Now, we have inlay on the top of the sleeve run, okay? Why do we have it there? This is in case you want to fine-tune the sleeve. Just because your sleeve and armhole match perfectly on paper doesn't mean that it's going to be the case when you have your shoulder pad, all your manipulations and all of that. So sometimes you have to give it a little bit extra. Now, if you don't have this inlay, and many tailors don't leave this inlay, you're going to have to rip the entire sleeve down, shift the pattern down, recut the sleeves. Not good. Have a little bit of inlay there, know how to work with it, and if you have to fine-tune the sleeve, you can do that very efficiently without having to rip the damn sleeve apart, okay? So why am I saying this? This inlay makes the surplus that you're gonna distribute seem like a lot. So imagine I bring this over like this, and in reality, the area behind my sleeve run is where I should be looking at. That's the ease that I'm distributing around the armhole. However, if I look beyond the sleeve run, this inlay makes it seem like I'm putting 2 inches of fullness in that one spot. So don't look at the edge of your sleeve. Look at the area where you're trapping the surplus fabric in between your stitches, okay? So this is the whole point of having a good technique. Move this over, okay? Keep everything flat so that you can see how much ease is there, and take a bite. Like that, okay? Hold your last stitch, move this over, baste over the surplus, and continue all the way. Now here is a good rule of thumb. If you can compress the gathers that you have trapped between your bites, if you can compress them or press them flat with your finger and they don't turn into pleats, it means that you have a good distribution. If you try to do this and it turns bam into a pleat, it means you have too much there, okay? Now we're gonna fine tune this as we baste, but it's good for you to know. So let's continue. Sleeve lays flat as much as it can. You bring this over This is just a distance of 3/8 half an inch. And you baste over it. Now, you may have the tendency to hold this in a curve and then also on top of that put in some fullness. Don't do that. Why? Because if you hold this on a curve, you're already making, look, you're already making this longer. You see, there's now a little bit of surplus there. So if you have this in a curve, the relative layer length is already creating surplus on the top layer because it's held in a curve. On top of that, if you put anything else, it's going to be too much. So hold everything flat, move the runs over together, and let the whole shape by angle and opposing curve factors do their work. As you get closer, this area you can see is fully on the bias. It means that you can compress a lot more ease or fullness in there. So you can be a little bit more comfortable with giving a little bit extra here, knowing that you can compress it. Don't allow anything to pull or get in your way. You should always be comfortable. If you find yourself rotating around the jacket, stop, rotate the jacket around you, and continue. Now, some of you might wonder what this top pitch mark is. This should not be matched to the shoulder seam. This represents the highest point of the sleeve, which in turn represents or should represent the highest point of the armhole. Now, if you hold this jacket in your hands, the highest point of the armhole is probably somewhere here, okay? But it's up for debate during the fitting. So maybe you make some changes and the highest point shifts from being here to over here. That's something you assess during the fittings. But for now, the only thing you need to know is that this represents the highest point of the sleeve and the highest point of the armhole, nothing else. So let's continue. Now, the higher you go on the armhole, the more difficult it becomes to move this around without this getting in your way. So when you get to the shoulder seam, I want you to put a back tack. Make sure that the thread is not loose. Hold the end of the thread, pull the rest, put a back tack, and then hands in the armhole from the lapel side of the jacket like that. Hold the needle and turn everything inside out. When you turn everything inside out, you work from inside the armhole, and you can now go all around without anything getting in your way. Now, before you continue, I now want you to pin the intersecting point of your back pitch to that of the sleeve. So take your sleeve back pitch, pin it to that of the armhole, and put your needle in perpendicular to the armhole run. Why? Because when you want to distribute ease, you can easily do that. If your pin is put in this direction, look, you can't get close to that point to do your ease distribution properly, okay? So now we are at the top of the sleeve. The top of the sleeve, normally, if you don't have a roped sleeve, doesn't get a lot of fullness. But since we have a roll right all the way to the top because it's a roped sleeve, we need to have some fullness there. But you can't put too much because this area is on the straight grain. And as I've already explained, the straight grain doesn't take on a lot of compression. It can easily turn into pleats. So you have to be careful with that. Also, when you baste this top area, you have the inlays of your shoulders. You can baste through them, but make sure they're not folded back, and also make sure you don't have any canvas underneath it, okay? You're only basting through the fabric. You see, this already wants to move back and so distribute itself. So I'll just try to work with nature instead of resisting it and see where it takes me. It's already distributing itself. It's kind of informing me based on the nature of the runs where things more or less should be, and I'll try to be attentive to that. So we have a little bit of ease. That seems like enough, but we don't know yet because we have a lot to distribute here at the back. Again, this part of the sleeve is between the top pitch and the back pitch. There's a lot of bias there. So You can get a little bit more in there if you know how to distribute everything carefully and assess once we're done. So now if you are reaching your back pitch and you are thinking, man, there is a lot of pleats there, or there is a lot of things there that I cannot distribute smoothly, it's all right, keep going, distribute as much as you can, because your back pitch should be exactly where you've pinned it to that of the jacket. It should not go down or up because you're trying to redistribute anything, okay? You always have to match those points because they are your cutting references. So once you get to that point, do a back tack, take the pin out, and continue downwards. Now, what you're looking at is the back panel and the side body panel. We're going to distribute the ease up to midway the side body side, and then everything at the bottom here should be free of ease, okay? So everything you do has to fade off to nothing in this point, roughly where the inlay begins, okay? And again, you're matching the bottom of the sleeve, this run, to the edge of the armhole and not the basting that is here, all right? Not the remainder of the armhole marking. So again, hold it well in your hands. Now here, you cannot easily bring this over because these are two straight lines, okay? So what you're gonna do is you're gonna manually push in fabric based on how much you were pushing in before for the first 1 or 2 stitches. And then before you continue, just hold everything, bring it all the way down, like so, and see how much there is left. If there's nothing left, you should not distribute anything. But if there is a little bit left, then you know at least, okay, so that's about what, 3/8, half an inch of fullness. I know that I should not put too much here, otherwise I will start to gather the side body. A little bit, baste over it, and I will from here on start to fade out into 0. So when I reach the bottom, you can see the sleeve and the armhole are pretty much the same size. Maybe the sleeve is a little bit bigger, but it's not so big for me to distribute tons of surplus fabric around, okay? And back tack 3 times once you get to the bottom. Cut your thread, and now we should do a quick evaluation before holding anything in our hands to see how things are. Make sure that the pad can lay onto the canvas and the canvas wraps just around the pad like so, and that this fabric is not twisted inwards, okay? So everything is pushed out, canvas lays on the fabric, pad lays on the canvas, and then you turn it inside out, okay? So we're gonna have a first look. Now, if, like me, your lapel or collar is getting over the sleeve, just feel free to flip it over and have a look. What you'll notice is a few things. So these pleats usually happen for 2 reasons. Either you have too much distribution of ease in one point, or you have a wide inlay that turns into a pleat. I already showed you that a little bit of surplus turns the edge of the inlay into this big amount of surplus. So if you look at this place, this is where that pleat was. And when I go with my hands in between there and I smooth it out, it disappears. So it looks pretty smooth. All right. So I will try to get all these pleats that have formed to sit smooth without actually being a pleat before I actually decide whether there is too much distributed on one point or not. So at first glance, what I would look for is whether my front pitch is matching to that of the sleeve. So the front pitch of the armhole matches to the front pitch of the sleeve. And I also look whether at the back, try to get everything lay flat. There's a lot compressed here. To see whether the back pitch is matching to that of the armhole at the back. Now, obviously, I have too much here. So what needs to happen is the following. I need to reduce some of the surpluses that I have here by bringing it over to the front, okay? So what that essentially means is that my top pitch, now being in this point, needs to move over by perhaps 3/8 or 1/4 towards the shoulder seam. Before I even hold this in my hand to see whether it looks nice, I'm going to make sure that this distribution moves a little bit over to the front, and whatever surplus I have here, perhaps even further. But I should never move my front pitch down or my back pitch down or up, okay? Back pitch and front pitch stay fixed. Anything else is distributed between these 2 points, all right? That makes it a little bit easier to understand. So let me go ahead and do that, and then I'll hold it up and evaluate it once on my hand. So the easiest way to do this is to flip everything inside out, and then, since we are keeping our front pitch, which is this one, in the same place, I will start my new basting a little bit lower, maybe like 3 or 4 stitches below, put a knot in my thread, baste up to the front pitch, okay, put a back tack there, because I'm going to snip the rest of the threads. But before I snip the rest of the threads, I'll go to the top pitch, because that was my reference, and I said that, hey, this top pitch needs to come a little bit more towards the shoulder seam by maybe 1/4. So what I'll do is I'll snip that, take a pin, move this over, you can make a mark if you wish, where the top pitch is, move it over a little bit. Maybe this is not the result that you have, but this is how you would do it. Move it over a little bit, put a pin there, and now I know that by moving this over, I have freed up some space in the back for myself to distribute all this crap a little bit forwards. And now that naturally gives me a little bit more here to distribute, so I'm going to go ahead and do that, starting from the bottom. Position the jacket well, okay? This is a moment where everything can just be very annoying and you're going to get upset. So make sure that everything is positioned well. Nothing is pulling, nothing is in your way. Make a snip in the thread of your previous basting. Remove some of the threads, some of the stitches, and now we can easily access the front of the sleeve and start redistributing again. So now a little bit more than the previous time. The very front of the sleeve should not have too much ease. So whatever it is, it has to be a little bit above your front pitch. So the front pitch area, while you do gather some, it should not be excessive. What is excessive? Well, partially you have to find that for yourself, but it should not pucker the front of the sleeve. So I can easily compress this with my finger. That's good. Okay, so we have a little bit to distribute here, but it seems that the first correction is more or less successful looking at it from the inside. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a back tack at the top pitch here, and now try to distribute the excess that I had here in the back a little bit better with less puckers and pleats as a result. I may have to repeat this step a few times. Now you can understand why so many tailors don't like to work with all the inlay, because it's a little bit more difficult to distribute, but if you learn to deal with it, you'll be so much more efficient. You can make instant adjustments to perfect your sleeves during the finishing stage without having to run the risk of recutting them or whatsoever. It just adds up to your skills. You become a more competent tailor overall, I think. Now remember, we want our back pitch to stay in the same place, right? And back tack on the back pitch. Move a few stitches down. Back tack once, and that should be enough, okay? So now what I'll do is I'll have a look again, okay? This is a process we're going through. This is not some, oh, I don't know what I'm doing, I'll just have a look, okay? So once you go through it, according to whatever the sleeve allows you to put in, okay? You put your trust in the sleeve. Then you have a look. Then you distribute. Then you have a look again, and you go through that process. So the next thing I'm going to do, knowing that this distribution is better than the previous one, at least by 50% or so, I'll look at it again, okay? So get this out of the way, this color. Now, obviously, this sleeve is bigger than, as I said, the final result is going to be. But what are we going to do with this? First, I'll make sure, I'll go inside here and make sure that the fabric is not folded back. So the armhole inlay is not folded back. Everything should be folded towards the top sleeve, okay? Like that. Okay, now it can lay flat. Now that it lays flat, I'll go in again and I'll try to get rid of these small pleats that seem to be there as a result of our inlay. Can I make it smoother? Yeah, that's smoother. That's smoother. So this doesn't look like there is too much fullness there because it seems that it can be compressed easily with the iron, okay? Now, what about the top? The top seems to be kind of like similar, though I cannot really get a good assessment if everything is folded back. So that seems like it can be compressed as well. You see, it is a lot, I know that, but it's not something that turns into pleats. And then we look at the back. So can I smooth this out by flattening the pleats in the inlay? Yes, I can. So that looks a little bit smoother. That looks a bit smoother overall. Obviously, I can't do that with all the pleats, but I can do that with most of the pleats. And when I do that, I get a sense that if the fabric is compressed properly, most of this is distributed correctly. So what do? Double check, back pitch is in the right place. Maybe it's a millimeter down. You have allowances, just don't make it any more than a millimeter. Front pitch is in the right place. So next part of the process, I will dry press this, no steam, no water, nothing. The dry pressing is going to compress the areas that can be compressed, but areas that cannot be compressed anymore will just stay as pleats or puckers, okay? Then I'll have a look after the dry pressing. That will inform me which areas can take a little bit more and which areas have, been crammed up all the way to the max. And then according to that, I'll make my next adjustment. So we're gonna press before we evaluate it on our hand. Take your sleeve board. Make sure you're using the narrow part. You're going to only need the fabric and you're going to position it very patiently on the sleeve board so that you have at least an inch of your sleeve board from the basting that you have done on your sleeve to the edge of the sleeve board. Okay, so that's about 2.5 centimeters. Then, making sure that nothing is in your way, you're going to take the iron and you're going to introduce it from the inside towards the outer edge, okay? Be careful not to make any pleats in your inlay. So gently move around, move the jacket as you should. Be patient and skillful. You see how I'm curving it around the sleeve board? Compress. Now you can hold the edge of the inlay to guide away all of that surplus until it's neatly flattened, like that, and move your way upwards. When you do the dry pressing and you hold the armhole area flat, you can see whether the roll of the jacket is smooth or not, like that. Okay, so that looks pretty smooth. If you have a sleeve head roll in there, it's going to fill it up in a smooth manner. But if it remains puckered or there is too much surplus, then you're in trouble. Again, don't allow the pleats to form in your inlay, or at least try to keep them to an absolute minimum, because the more pleats you have in there, the more they're going to interfere with the smooth roll of your sleeve. Now here is a bit tricky because you have too many layers stacked on top of each other. There is the hind arm seam inlay, there is the sleeve inlay, there is going to be the inlay of the side body all of those are going to make it difficult for you to press it all nice and smooth. Now we get to the rest of the undersleeve. There is very little here, plus the entire area is almost on the bias, so it's very easily compressed. Nonetheless, we will go through the process with patience. Let's have a look. So there's a little bit of surplus here. That's turned into a pleat during pressing. So I'll ignore that. It's a very minor small pleat. That's nothing. Then I'll move around. That's smooth, that's smooth, that's smooth. The back, because there is no canvas, lays very difficult on the pad. So that looks smooth as well, given that this is a sleeve that's bigger than it should be. I just want to show you how much you can compress and that it is possible if you just focus on it. So all around, it's pretty smooth. Let's pick it up and evaluate. Looking at the front, looking at the back. Well, the back definitely looks better. All the puckering that I had here is gone, partially because I moved the top pitch by about a quarter towards the shoulder seam. That freed up some space. However, I still have some puckering on the front. Now, the good thing about pressing, especially dry pressing between the stages or the rounds of ease distribution, is it allows you to see which areas cannot take any more compression. So the front, in this case, cannot take any more compression. Even after the pressing, it still puckers. What do I do? Well, I know that the front pitch has to stay in the same place. So does the back pitch. The only place this pucker can go is up, because bringing it down requires me to move the front pitch down. I don't want to do that. What do? I'll just bring this a little bit up in this area, perhaps a bit here and a bit here, without creating any more puckers on the top or the back, okay? Once I've done that, we're going to evaluate the entire sleeve and move on to the right one, all right? So all I need to do is to bring some of this excess compression a little higher, which means that my top pitch can either stay in the same place and I just bring this and distribute it here, or I move my top pitch back for about 1/8 so that this entire space has a little bit more room to distribute this, and of course that causes me to distribute a little bit more here, which could be okay. Okay, so instead of just going in and randomly trying to redistribute this, I'm going to try to apply it a bit methodically. So I'll turn this around so that I can see the top pitch. Now I said the top pitch can go a little bit towards the back. So I'll take my chalk. This is where it currently is. I'll move it back by about 1/8. You know, we don't want too much here. Make a snip here, open this up, take a pin, move it over a little bit further back. So right there, and pin. Now that I've done that, I can position the jacket as good as I can. Clearly this is the area where we have too much. I will unpick whatever I have here up to the area just above the front pitch. Thread my needle, make a knot. Now, since we already have, or I already have a back tack on the front pitch, all I'm going to do is to just put my first stitch with a knot, no back tacks needed, go over my starting line, and now I will distribute everything a little bit smoother. So that means less in this space. Now, the good thing is the iron has already compressed much of the cloth, and I don't need to pile in any more fullness than the cloth allows me to. I still try to do some, but not as much as I initially had. Remember, keep everything flat, just introduce tiny amounts, keep your stitch length small. All right, there's obviously too much here, so I'm not going to try to pile that in. I'll just flatten it and try to push it a little bit higher. This is kind of precision work, what we're doing here. It's not just, you know, mindlessly moving ease around. It's being very mindful of how much ease we had in there, how much ease we're putting in with each stitch, and where we can keep things flat and where we can put a bit more. So I think this is doable. Since this is the bias area, should be able to put a bit more here without getting in trouble. I'll just keep going. Now I did move everything about 1/8 over, and I still have some surplus towards the top. Okay, so one reminder, the sleeve is bigger than it's going to be in the final result, so it is too big, but instead of just trying to dive for this pin position that I've placed, I'll just take it out. As I said, the top pitch can move back and forth. It's only an indicator of the highest point of the shoulder and sleeve. And so if it has to move, it can move. It's the back pitch and the front pitch that we stick to. Maybe I can get a little bit more here. I'm sure that once we get to the back pitch, there isn't much to distribute anymore. I'll put a back tag here at the top. And now see what we can do in this area. Precision work. Finely distribute. Don't rush. Don't be scared. Don't panic. Now, the area that is very much underestimated is right where we have all those inlays on the hind arm, where it's very difficult to see what you're putting in, how much of it. And so many people end up not putting much in there, but that area is still pretty much on the bias. So you can still get rid of a lot of surplus in that area. Okay, seems good to me so far. Almost there, very close. And I think that's it. I think we have reached the back pitch. I'll go a few stitches further down, just to make sure nothing unravels below there. Make a back tack. Once is enough. I have plenty of stitches there. And I'm going to dry press. Before I dry press, I'll just have a double check to see if things are looking smooth without the pressing. Now, there is still a small pleat here, but I think this has stayed there from the previous pressing that I did. So everything does seem smoother. There is a little bit of piling up in this area, which we know is too much, but the trick is, can we distribute it as evenly as we can, despite it being too much? Seems like I can compress it. So this is what I was talking about, you know, the upper part of the back pitch being underestimated. So you see how much I've got here? Well, it's because I can easily see what I'm doing. But as soon as I reach this area, I have 2 layers of fabric. It becomes very difficult to see what you're putting in, whereas I can put some of this in here and that would still work. But somehow I haven't. Now I can go back and do it, but before I do that, I can press, have a look, and then redo if necessary, because I don't want to get stuck here for the rest of my life. Let's take our sleeve board, flip this inside out, and very carefully dry press. Get the canvas out of the way. It's only the cloth. Again, we are at this area, and because it's got too many layers here, it becomes difficult to press as well. So I have to be very careful and diligent to press this in a way that doesn't create pleats, but still compresses all these excess layers. And I do that by just pulling the ends of the inlay, trying to reposition everything, and just compress that area. When we get to finish the sleeve, it becomes easier because we press the seam of the hind arm open instead of pushing all of it towards the top sleeve. But for now, we have to deal with this as it is laying in front of us. So why don't we have a look? If your canvas flattens, just crease it back in place, but never crease it on top of the pad, okay? Never do that. The reason for that is it elevates your pad. It's not going to be the way your jacket is going to be finished. It will mislead you into thinking that you have a better or higher shoulder line than you actually will have. And if you base your fittings around that, then by the time the jacket is finished, you have a different shoulder angle than what the client requires. And since shoulders are one of the most important factors in balancing the jacket, you will have trouble with the balance of your pattern. All right? All right, so how does it look? Well, it looks pretty smooth on the front. It looks a little bit less smooth on the top, but all things considered, it's pretty smooth. Eventually, what we are trying to do with this lesson is give you a bigger sleeve so that you are forced to distribute ease from right above the front pitch to right above the back pitch and not have any area where you can get away with flat material. So that means that every square inch or every inch of this area is packed with ease. It's just in the right place. So let me pick this up and have a look. Now, I recommend that anytime you're evaluating sleeves, you evaluate them on the individual. It can be misleading to just hold things up, but sometimes during the sewing process, you have to look and see what's happening so that you can move on and improve things. Now, on that, I have 6 points that I want you to keep in mind whenever you're evaluating the sleeves on your hands, okay? Let's begin with point number 1, very important. Whenever you're holding the jacket in your hands, you have to make sure that all these inlays that we have here are in the right place. So, first we have the shoulder pad. Over the shoulder pad, we have the canvas laying flat, so it's not folded on itself and then on the canvas. And over the canvas, we have the inlays of the shoulder seam and that of the sleeve, okay? So, I'm gonna do that now. I'm gonna hold this up, make sure that the canvas is over the pad from the front to the back. Then we have all the inlays, okay? Everything is pushed towards the sleeves. And now I can actually hold and evaluate, okay? So, point number 2, how are you gonna hold this? In the traditional model, I explained that you have to hold it in this crab-like position, putting your hands in there, have your thumb on the upper part of the front side, your 4 fingers towards the back pitch, and that allows you to spread the sleeves open or spread the shoulder open as if an individual's body is filling up that space. But that's a basic way of evaluating sleeves. This has a construction that goes into the neck, so we have to fill up the neck area as well. What do? You can hold your hand like this or like this, and your thumb is going to mimic the neck, okay? So now I can hold it up like this and pretend as if the neck is in there as well. I can still spread the sleeves a little bit, and so if I hold it like this, it gives me a better evaluation all around, okay? You should be able to use multiple hand gestures to check everything and see whether they are in the right place, okay? So once you've got those 2 points, it's time for point number 3. Your front pitch mark and your back pitch marks must match. Why? These are our anchor points for sleeve cutting. Whenever we want to reduce the width or the height of our sleeves, we need to know where to anchor the sleeves on the pattern, and these 2 pitch marks serve that purpose. If they go lower or higher, your sleeves may go up or backwards, and that's not good. Now, while you're holding it and you've checked your pitch marks, which are fine in this case, you can also hold the entire jacket up, allow everything to just fall down flat, fill up the hip shape, and your forearm seam, or rather forearm fold, should match this vertical pitch line that is marked square down from the most forward point of the armhole, okay? In this case, it matches, okay? It's pretty good. It's hanging correctly. This is going parallel to the floor, that's falling down straight, and so it's a good indication. But you should always evaluate this on the individual, because no matter how you hold it, every time you might get a different hang, okay? This is not the body. The hand is not the entire body. So that's that. Point number 4. The distribution between these pitch marks is crucial. I have given you a bigger sleeve so that you don't have any empty gaps or spaces and are forced to compress the entire surplus from pitch mark to pitch mark. That gives you a deeper understanding of what the cloth can take. And so once you have that imprinted in your mind, then you can say, well, I want this to have less, this to have more, and play around with it, okay? So that's that. Now, as we are talking about this distribution of ease, another thing, which is point number 5, that I want you to pay attention to is your front roll. When you take your hand and you brush it against the side of the sleeve and you roll it inwards, you see how this roll smoothly just continues. Nothing happens, no distortions, okay? That's what you want to see. If I'm going to exaggerate now, if you try to do that and this is what happens, okay, it could partially mean that you don't have any ease in the front and everything is piled up in the back. But if you've distributed everything fairly, it might mean that the area underneath the armhole up to the front pitch is a little bit tight. So your sleeve doesn't have enough ease in the lower front curve, okay? Now, the 6th point is going to be the quality of your run. Now, there is a lot of ease going on there, so it's going to distort the run slightly. But if I hold this up like so, and you can look at the run, you're probably going to do that looking at it from the top. If I hold this up, you see that this run is more or less a smooth, straight run. It's not going like this, you know, it's not making dodgy curves. It just looks nice, neat, straight, nothing weird, okay? And of course, speaking about runs, you might have redone this whole distribution of sleeves, so always check to see if your shoulder seam is still going in that elegant curve and it's not being stretched out and distorted, all right? Now that you know that, let's baste around the armhole. When we baste around the armhole, the entire cloth is attached to the canvas. That might highlight some, well, unevenness in the distribution, but that's fine. We've given our best. We're not going to sit still in this stage. We're going to move on. But that should do the trick. Then I'm going to do everything once I've basted around on the right sleeve and then put it on and evaluate the whole thing further. All right, let's do it. So thread your needle, make a knot. And now I want you to make sure that all the seams are out exactly where they should be. Nothing is twisted or folded inwards. And if that's the case, gently lift the sleeves up, allow this area to just lay flat. You don't have to pull anything. You don't have to clear everything. You just hold it. Make sure it's just laying flat on the canvas. Start right in front of the underarm seam. Back tack once, go through the entire canvas and baste around very close, as close as you can to the armhole. Okay, now all I'm doing is I'm just making sure everything is sitting neatly on top of one another and that the inlays are pushed towards the sleeve. They might have the tendency to fold back. At some point above the front pitch, you're going to start feeling the shoulder pad. You should go through the shoulder pad as well. Because the shoulder pad is fairly thick, this might be difficult. You see, I'm not pulling anything. I'm just doing this, you know, brushing against the cloth. So try to go through the whole thing as much as you can. Stay close to the armhole, about 1 millimeter or 2. But if you get in this area, just go in, up and down, okay? Like so. And make sure the shoulder pad is held in the natural curve that it should have over the shoulder. So don't flatten it and don't pull the thread too tight. Of course, you have to pay attention to the shoulder seam. This should not go backwards, especially not if you have the seam design shaped towards the front in a forwards curve. So pay attention to that as well. Now here on the back, again, make sure that everything is laying flat on the pad. You don't have to clear anything. The grain that you have here on the fabric should not go outwards. It should just be as it is, naturally straight. Still a very thick area of the pad, and it's very important that these bastings are close to the armhole. If they are not close to the armhole, well, the armhole can still move around and distort the sleeves. And we're going to baste until we are at the edge of the pad. Then I want you to back tack 3 times. 1, 2, 3, and that's it. Now, as I said, when we hold everything down by basting the cloth to the pad, that holding down pushes the fabric downwards against the pad and can create an exaggeration or highlight some imperfections in your ease distribution, okay? Now, there's of course less distribution here than there is here, but that's fine. This sleeve is going to be reduced in its width. It probably is going to be reduced in its height. We know that. And so we do our very best to distribute as much as possible by keeping the overall sleeve neat. But we're not going to cry about these things if we know how to improve them. So now that I've done this, I'm going to do exactly the same on the right sleeve. Now, my friends, I assume that those of you who are doing this with me and are following the Pagoda model are doing that because, well, you have some tailoring experience and you're at a level that allows you to do more advanced things. So I am still going to tell you how to baste the right sleeving if you're right-handed, because you're not going to be basting from the front towards the back. You're going to do it in reverse. But I'm going to use my left hand, so switch my thimble and still sew from the front to the back because I'm now sewing with my left hand. And I want you to do the same. I want you to practice this. I want you to have no handicaps when you are sewing. And all you have to do is practice and you'll make your life easier. So let me first explain what you'll do if you still want to baste the right sleeve with your right hand. By the way, if you're left-handed, reverse everything what I said. So left hand can baste the right sleeve in easier, so you can start with that. Then do the left sleeve with your right hand. Or if you still want to baste the left sleeve in with your left hand, well, you just reverse what I'm going to do here. Mark the front pitch. Seam off from the edge of the armhole. Mark the back pitch. This is the higher horizontal mark stitching, the one that's closer to the shoulder seam. So seam off. We're going to do the same on our sleeves. Front pitch parallel to the top sleeve run. That's going to be intersection number 1. Then we have our hind arm parallel seam off to the sleeve runs. That gives us intersection number 2. Those are the points that we're going to match to the armhole that we have in front of us, just as we did with the left sleeve. Like so. Now, if you want to sew with your right hand, the right sleeve, the reason why you can't go from the front towards the back is you're going to be sewing like this, okay? You know what I feel about sewing like this, so I'm not going to repeat that. What do you do? Well, you're going to pin the front pitch, bend the fabric over your hand like this, as we did with the other side. Allow the sleeve run to match the edge of the armhole at the bottom, right above the underarm seam. Okay, that's the underarm seam. We hold this in a curve. This falls on top of it, naturally bending. That bend creates relative layer length. It makes the sleeve a little bit easier than the armhole. We put a pin there. Then we're going to go over to the back pitch, pin the back pitch, get the intersections matching, like so. And now we're going to flip everything inside out, and you're going to sew from the inside, starting from the bottom, the very base of the armhole where you don't have any ease, and you're going to slowly distribute the ease more or less from where the inlay on the side body side begins. Okay, so this is the side body panel. Midway the side body side, that's where you're going to start putting in your ease. So this entire area can be flat, and then we can start distributing the ease until we get to the back pitch. Then we're going to move over towards the front in exactly the same manner that I explained. You can even look at the distance that your top pitch has from your shoulder seam and pin your top pitch, mark that distance and pin it there so that at least you have the reference for the other side. Then continue all around, all around, all around, all around until you end up at the bottom, okay? And then do the same redistribution. But since I'm not going to do it, I'm going to baste with my left hand because I want to encourage and inspire you to do the same. Since we are doing this as advanced levels, I'm going to take these pins out and just treat it as if it's the left sleeve. So I pin the front, thread my needle, position the jacket in front of me as it should, change hands, hold this in place. Now before I baste, something just interesting. If you ever have a sleeve, but you don't have any pitch marks and you're really confused about this all positioning and all of that, try to lay the jacket more or less flat, like so. Imagine we have no pitch marks, right? Like so. So let me take this out. Now, if you do have a chest line, you can take the most forward curve of the armhole, square straight down. That gives you this hang mark, this, pitch mark for the hang of the forearm fold. What you then can do is to baste, put the base of the armhole in place, position the sleeve so that this matches here. Now imagine you don't even have chest lines. But if you do that and you look at the base of your sleeve and everything is laying flat, you can at least have an idea. Let's say you move this up. You can at least have an idea of where to start. You see, if I pin this now right here, I'm only off, and I haven't done anything accurately. I'm not even off, I'm exactly there. So you will get at least very close to the front pitch position and know where to start. So you have that anchored, okay? Now, since this perfectly matched, I'll start with the same position. So, and then what you can do is exactly what I'm about to do. So you fold this over, make sure the base of the undersleeve matches the base of the armhole. Voila. Put a back tack in there with a knot. So the knot is in there, back tack goes in, and just treat it as the other sleeve. So hold everything in place, make sure you can see exactly what you're doing. Same stitch length, 3/8, bite size is about 1/4, and away we go. Rotate the entire jacket as you're moving around the armhole. Take the pin out, back tack around the front pitch, and continue. Move this over, baste over the surplus, hold the last bite, and continue. So now that I've reached the top, I'm going to do exactly the same as I did on the other sleeve. I'll flip it inside out and continue. I first have to pin my back pitch, but once I've done that, I'll continue as the rest. So now that I've basted the entire thing in at first, I can now switch back to my right hand because any other change that I make is going to be from the inside anyway. And I can easily now work from the inside, from right to left. So let's have a look, see what we have as distribution. So first, making sure that everything lays in the right place, which is the case. Then these pleats, I have to see if I can smooth them out by opening them from the inside, because that's a lot of inlay that is now turned into a pleat. So you see that pleat is now gone. It's become smooth. There's a pleat on the top here. Okay, this one is smooth now as well. This seems like it can be compressed, and overall not a bad distribution. Let's have a look at the back. Okay, so that can also be compressed and smoothed out. All right, so what do I do? Well, it's too difficult for me to see whether, this can move back a millimeter, this can move down a millimeter. So I'm just going to do what I did with the left sleeve. I'm going to dry press it. Dry pressing will allow me to see which areas can still take some fullness and which areas can't, and then based on that redistribute everything. If I would just take a rough measure, so that's going to be from the tip of my finger just about 1/8 below the crease that I have on my finger. It's roughly the same distance. So I'm going to dry press and then have a look. Now, if you ever get in an area where it seems like it's pleating, don't be content with just, pressing it into a pleat. Move it around. Get the edge of the inlay, try to bring it over to one side. Try to still do some distribution and manipulation with your fingers, because it's not always a pleat. There is a lot of inlay, as I said, and as you can see. So it requires you to work it in different directions until it's smooth. All right, so this to me seems pretty smooth. To be honest, all things considered, there's no point for me to try to bring this a millimeter over or bring this a millimeter down. The back, again, I could have brought some of this lower into the area where we have those two fabrics, those two layers, and I could probably deplete this, and turn it into a smooth roll, which it is. So, do you know what? Since the front pitch is matching and the back pitch is matching, I will baste around it and we can evaluate the entire sleeve. Now, once I've done that, I'm going to show you a trick. So I'll start from the back tack once. I already have a knot, so I don't need to do 3 back tacks. Get everything out of the way. And it really doesn't matter whether you do this from the front, from the back, as long as you are very careful with how you handle the fabric. You don't pull anything or push anything inwards or outwards. Now, when you see me do this and hold it with my hands, I'm just making sure that I have a good grip and I'm pushing the needle through the right area. But I'm not clearing anything, I'm not distorting anything. So whenever I'm doing this, I'm just making sure I'm holding it so that I can put the needle through. Just be very careful that everything is in the right place. Push the domette outwards, make sure it's wrapping nicely around the pad. And especially when you're going up and down, you can very easily pleat the seam allowances backwards. So please be careful for that. Again, don't clear anything outwards, don't put any strain on it. And try to keep your bite sizes consistent. I've been a bit inconsistent here. Now, you might also wonder, hey, I've seen pictures where people do a padding stitch here. What's the difference? Well, there should be no difference, but if you have analyzed the nature of a padding stitch, instead of holding 2 points in one direction, it holds 2 points perpendicular to the line that you're following. So it makes an up and down movement, but the bites are sideways. Whereas with a running stitch, the up and down movement also has, forwards and backwards bites. So the bites are in the direction that the stitches are heading or the entire run is heading. So if I would do padding stitches like this, I still make a downwards run, but I'm holding now more areas than I would do with a running stitch. So in some sense, it's better, and we actually get to use that when we are finishing the jacket. Imagine this is our line. Instead of doing a bite here, bite here, bite here, bite here, with the same stitch, the padding stitch does bite here, bite here, bite here, bite here. And so if I continue that, it's holding 2 points while making that run, whether upwards or downwards. But for now, we're just going to do a running stitch. Now, there is another question that you might have in your mind, and that is, why is this area the front pitch and not the actual seam? Where I used to work on Savile Row, and I think this happens in many areas, in most places in the world, and still happens, people refer to this front seam, the forearm seam, as the front pitch. So this is what they would match against the armhole to get the right coordinates. And so the idea is that you would draw a line like that, and then draw a line like that, and then go diagonally 45 degrees, and that is where your forearm seam should match. But one, if you do that, you get pretty close to here. Two, this might have worked better if you're using a 50-50 sleeve, whereby the forearm seam is not hidden on the inside. And so maybe if this was by about, 3/4 over here, it would have matched a little bit better. But it's not necessarily a rule that you can follow 100%. I think it works sometimes, and sometimes it doesn't work. What I prefer to rely on is an axis, is a grid, is something that is going to work 99% of the time. So when I'm holding this on my pattern flat, and I lay the sleeve on it flat, and I make sure the entire sleeve is positioned so that this matches where it should be, which is squared down from the most forward point of the armhole, and the base of my sleeve hits the right place, and the edge of my sleeve hits the forward curve, that gives me a better orientation because it takes into consideration the entire arm, not just a seam. Also, this seam, depending on how you stretch things, what the alterations have been on the sleeve, or whatever the cutting system has been, might not always end exactly in correspondence to, this little system that's only focusing on the front curve. So yes, you could refer to this as front pitch, but it's better to refer to this area as a front pitch because that's really where the most forward point of the armhole is, and square it down. It actually tells you where the forearm of the individual's arm will be, okay? Not, if you square this point down, you'll get somewhere else. And so it's not going to be that consistent. Let me put this jacket on now that I've basted it. And now that I've basted it, you can see it's showing the imperfections in the distribution of ease, but that's fine. We can live with that. Let's evaluate the sleeves, and then I'm going to show you a trick. Time for some evaluation. But before we begin, I would like to tell you something. This is the first time that I'm putting on the Pagoda model with sleeves. You might be tempted to look at everything that I have on but the sleeves. Now, I specifically want you to look at the left sleeve and ignore the right sleeve until I get to it, okay? If you've been working with our purple box or the pattern that's available on our website, and you've gone through all the steps, made up the Pagoda model, and I would take that from you and put it on, this is more or less how your jacket will look on me. This is how the Pagoda model fits me at its first stage. I say first stage because in the next lesson, bonus lesson, we're going to make certain changes to the body and the sleeves to prepare it before we finish it in the next module, okay? Having said that, please pay attention to the left sleeve, and I have 3 points that I want you to focus on. Point number 1, whenever you are evaluating sleeves, your front pitch and your back pitch should match. We've already established that. However, something that I want to draw your attention to is the pitch mark that I have here below. Remember when I was holding up the jacket, the sleeve actually aligned with this pitch mark here? Well, the sleeve is actually hanging pretty well. However, when I just drop my arms naturally, my forearm is not on that mark. It's about 1/2 inch in front of it. I'm only highlighting this to show you how important it is to not always trust this when you're evaluating the sleeve on your hands, but actually put it on the individual, then check. Now, since the sleeve actually fits well and is in the right coordinates, and it's just the mark that's off, what we would do in the next lesson is change the mark, apply that change on the pattern, and leave the rest unchanged, okay? So, point number 2. Whenever you have matched your front pitch and your back pitch, the distribution between them has to be as perfect as possible. Now, the good thing is, this is a controlled environment in which you're learning, meaning the pattern that you're using is tested, and we can both conclude that it's possible to put that sleeve that's a lot bigger into the smaller armhole and still get smooth results. So have a look from the front. If I do this, no twists, nothing. The roll just continues naturally into the forearm. Have a look from the side. No twists. My arm hangs down and the sleeve is just neatly wrapping around it. From the back, again, ignore anything that's on the body, just look at the left sleeve. And that's that, okay? So that's point number 2. Now, point number 3. We worked very hard during the canvas construction lesson and the Pagoda shoulder pad lesson to create a construction for the shoulder that isn't losing its shape once the weight of the sleeve pulls the ends of the shoulder down, okay? So I want you to look at the shoulder shape. As you can see, it's maintained its concave surface, okay? If you're working on your own project and you put your sleeves in and your pad just goes flat or straight, then you're not really in the Pagoda domain. You've just created a pad that collapses. But if you follow the steps and the construction that I've provided and you've done everything as I've described, you should end up with a shoulder that has a smooth curve and then goes into a nice little rope at the end once the sleeves are finished, all right? So those are the 3 points that I want you to pay attention to. By the way, I'm only holding this up because I want you to see the sleeves. My lapels are too wide. It would otherwise be covered. I'm not trying to be James Dean. Now, right sleeve. What's up with this one? If you compare the two, you'll notice that the left sleeve is obviously better. Why? Well, very simple. I only went once around the armhole. I basted it in, had a look, and I thought, yeah, it's fine. Front pitch is matching, back pitch is matching, so I don't need to be bothered with the ease distribution. You might get the same results. Mind you, despite the fact that it looks messy in terms of distribution, since the front pitch and the back pitch are matching, the sleeve is still hanging correctly, okay? So it's in the right coordinates, it's in the right place. It's just a messy look on the roll. Now, I want you to use this as your standard. Imprint it in your mind, please. I'm proving to you that it's possible with patience and skill to get a sleeve that would otherwise look like this to look like this. Having said that, there is a trick that I want to teach you. That trick helps you with 2 questions. Those questions are, what do I do if I quickly want to fit my jacket and don't have time to get it as neat as possible, but still want to have a good fitting? And question number 2, how do I know if my sleeve is too wide, how much to reduce it by? Let me show you the trick, and then you'll find out how that helps you with it. So you take your jacket, and imagine you have this as a result. The distribution is a bit messy. You know that the sleeve is bigger than it should be, but you don't know by how much to reduce it by, and you don't know how to get this smooth, or at least you know it, but you haven't developed the skills to do it. Obviously, I recommend practice to get it as good as the left one, as I showed you, but suppose you're in a rush or whatever. This is what you do. You take the sleeve that you have, let's say it's in this stage. You're going to start from the back pitch, okay? The sleeve is already in, by the way. You're going to start from the back pitch. You're going to bring in as much as you think the cloth can handle and stop right there. Then you're going to start from the bottom, so that's the front pitch. Put in the ease that you know the cloth can 100% take and compress, and stop where your previous stitching ended, and you'll end up with some surplus. That surplus will turn into a pleat. What you can do is press that pleat flat. It's going to create a little blip here, but the rest of the sleeve on the front and on the back will look neat. Now, you can also put a small pleat here and a smaller pleat maybe at the back, or put the pleat instead of the top right at the back here. Wherever you put it, I think it's best to put it at the top. You can always show that the front of the sleeve will be neat, the back of the sleeve will be neat, and if you're doing this for a client or a customer, you can always say that this is just for the fitting and not the actual style. So let me go ahead and do this and then put it on and compare it with the other left sleeve, which actually was set in and distributed pretty neatly. So I'll thread my needle. I'll keep the sleeve as it is. First, take out the stitching that I have around the armhole. Flip it inside out. Thread your needle start at the back pitch, perhaps a bit below that, back tack once, back tack at the back pitch. And now I'm going to remove my previous basting all the way to the very top, okay? So this is now all back to where it was. It's still a bit, not so smooth. I can quickly just smooth it out on my fingers. Careful not to burn, but you don't have to do much. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the amount of ease that I know for 100% the cloth can take. So that means just a tiny amount of ease. And this is just a manual gather, very small amounts. I'll keep going until I get to the top pitch. And here I will stop, back tack twice. Now, the more experience you have, the more sleeves you've put in, the better you know how much the sleeve can take. Now, I know that what I've put in there is not enough. I could still put in a little bit more. But more or less, this demonstrates the principle at the very least. So what do I do next? Well, next I'm going to flip it towards the front. So just move over to the front pitch, remove all the previous basting that I had up to the back tack that I have on my front pitch. Now I can either sew with the other hand, or I could say, this is what I'll do for 1 baste, 2 baste, move my way up as I'm pretending to distribute ease until I get to the very top of the sleeve. So now I have this tiny pleat up here. It's a very small pleat. It's about 1/4 on the double. And if I would take this out as a cut, it would be a total of 1/2 inch. So what do I do? Well, I'll turn it into a pleat. Make sure everything matches at the top. Just start in front of it, so that's turned into a definite pleat. And now I'll just move my way downwards. See, if I would start with my left hand and I would go upwards, I could have done that without doing this twice. I'm only showing you if you don't know how to sew with your other hand. I can now start distributing downwards. And here we have just a little bit of ease until we get to the front pitch, and then I'll continue a few stitches downwards, back tack, and then I'm going to press. Now, if you are using a cotton fabric or even a linen, I recommend you don't really press any pleats in your fabric, especially not with water. But since this is a practice jacket, feel free to do it. I'm going to do it just to show you, not with water, just dry pressing, to show you what the differences are and how helpful this technique can be. But please do not use this as a license to get away with not properly distributing the ease. Actually, in fact, this technique is very dangerous and can give you very tight sleeves if you don't know what the maximum is that the cloth can take without looking messy. You can really apply this trick best when you know, because of your experience and your skill level, what the maximum amount of ease is that the cloth can take without looking messy, so that you don't accidentally end up with a pleat that's 2 inches because you didn't put any ease anywhere else, and so end up with a tight sleeve. So now that I get here, what do? Well, I just pleat this down like so, and I make sure that the pleat turns into almost like a dart, goes into a point about 1/2 inch, 3/8 below my basting. So that's that. That keeps it flat and doesn't show it as a puffy pucker. So it's like a curse word, you puffy pucker. And I can then compress the rest. And that's that. Now, let's have a look. The front of the sleeve looks very neat. You remember how it looked? The pitch marks are still in place, so the sleeve is going to hang correctly. The back is neat. You know that you have to reduce the sleeve width by the amount that this pleat has, which is about 1/2 inch. That's 1/4 on the double. Because you have pressed this flat, it doesn't distort that much. If you're doing this for your own fitting, you know that this will go. If your customer is looking at this and they're like, hey, I don't want to, sprezzatura pleat there, then you're going to say, don't worry, it's only for a fitting. It's just so that I know how much to reduce the sleeves by, okay? Let me baste around this, put the jacket on, and then compare it to the left sleeve and the previous right sleeve, all right? So now that we've basted around, let's put it on and check it out. So I've basted around the right sleeve after having performed the trick for you with the pleat at the top of the sleeve. I want you to compare this with how it looked previously. Of course, it looks neater, but it's a bit flat. Now I want you to look at the left sleeve. The left sleeve is the sleeve that I properly distributed as good as I could without doing any tricks or cutting any corners. Naturally, because of the proper distribution of ease, the left sleeve has a better roll. The front roll continues beautifully down towards the forearm, whereas this one looks a little bit flat. Now, I do want to bring your attention to the fact that the front pitch and the back pitch on the right sleeve haven't moved. So, if I turn around, you'll notice that the sleeve is just hanging as it was. It looks a bit neater in terms of ease distribution, though it has a pleat on the top. But overall, I can move my arms and it still looks pretty neat, okay? Now you can look at it from the back as well. Again, ignoring the collapse underneath the armhole on the body. And that's it, okay? Now, I also want to bring your attention to something else. I talked about this, but I didn't show it to you. Remember when I said that if you roll the sleeves towards the body, it should roll naturally without breaking. Well, in the case of the left sleeve, this is true. The front roll continues to the forearm. However, on the right sleeve, this isn't the case. When I move my arms slightly forwards, you'll notice an instant collapse on this area right here. So I'll move both sleeves slowly forwards. Compare the two. You see how the right one has the tendency to collapse quicker? That's because the area between the front pitch and the base of the sleeve, on the top sleeve, is a little tight. Now, what do I do about that if I have that issue? Well, I have to bring some of the ease from the back towards the front without moving the back pitch. So it's just redistributing the area between the back pitch and the front pitch to make sure that we have a little bit more ease right here, okay? So now that you know this and you've seen the comparisons, please listen to what I have to say. I'm not showing you tricks so that you can cut corners. I'm showing you tricks so that you can find your way through difficult situations in case you stumble upon them. So if you're ever in a rush and you have to put a fitting together, the sleeves are too big, the client is coming in 5 minutes, this is how you can still present a neat sleeve without having all the puckers. Now, another thing that I want to highlight is please be patient. Sleeves are not straight seams, as I already said. They require your patience. They require you to do things properly. So if you want to redo the sleeves and you lack patience or you're running out of patience, don't start pinning areas that you would normally baste. So when you're trying to attach the fabric to the canvas by basting around the armhole, don't use pins instead. Pins are hard pieces of metal that distort the fabric, okay? This is very important to keep in mind. Now, if you want to baste the sleeves and you're running out of patience, please don't use pins instead of a basting. Just use a proper basting thread, okay? The distortions that pins can create can really throw you off and make you even go crazy during the process. Having said that, that's that. And that was sleeves. I don't know how you experienced the entire lesson, but I felt during the lessons that it was all a bit too simple. We only had to match a pitch mark and do some ease distribution. Now, you might wonder, why did he give us sleeves that are bigger and why is he emphasizing so much on the distribution of ease? This is the reason. When you are forced to play around with distribution of fabric, you get to learn the capacity that the fabric has. Now, in our case, it's linen, but if you do this with multiple fabrics, you build up references in your mind of how far this fabric can be pushed in terms of compression. Why is this important? Well, you want your sleeves to look full and crafted as if from some material like porcelain or marzipan, as some would like to call it. It should look sculpted, okay? And you can never get to that point if all you've been doing was putting sleeves with no ease. You never learn what the cloth can take, and you're always going to be scared of any little surplus around that armhole or around that sleeve. The only reason that I can now explain these things and break them up and go through them step by step with you is not because I was trained with perfect sleeves. When I was doing my apprenticeship on Savile Row, I got sleeves without a pitch mark on the body, without a pitch mark on the front, without a pitch mark on the back. I didn't even know what the starting point was of the sleeve. Can you imagine what kind of a disaster that is? And so, in some sense, I had to reinvent the entire concept of sleeves for myself, which is a bit sad because, you know, before me, for thousands of years, people have been making jackets and suits and garments with sleeves. And so now here I am, I have to reinvent everything. But at the same time, it was really good because I understood everything at the most fundamental level. I had a lot of questions about it, and so that caused me to research and research and research. So for now, I hope that you can appreciate my concern with you mastering ease distribution for the reasons that I explained. In our next lesson, for which I'm very excited about, we are going to make a few minor adjustments. While it's okay for you to go through an entire course and make a perfect jacket, I really want you to learn every bit that you can from each stage. This is a base fitting, so it would be good to treat it as a fitting. I've introduced a few minor faults into the pattern of the body. The sleeves are a bit bigger as well, so I'm going to go through them in the next lesson, fit the jacket as if I'm the customer and you've made something for the customer. And so make those minor adjustments, show to you how to bring them on paper, and then, of course, make them on the actual jacket. That will prepare it for Module 2, in which we're going to finish the jacket. My name is Reza, Mowgli behind the camera, and we look forward to seeing the next lesson. Take care. So let's have a quick look. We have quickly pressed, quick look, quick press, quick books, tax efficiency. Don't use pins instead. Pins are hard pieces of metal. Hoe begin ik altijd de outro's? And that was sleeves. Zo begin ik altijd, toch? And that was sleeves. Zo begin ik dan, yeah. So, this is what we're going to do. First, I'm going to talk you through the basics, blah, 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 blah.